Has this ever happened to you? Well, don't throw that old umbrella out. It's time to make some art. You got the right idea there, buddy. This video is both about the art, but also the journey of changes and new directions that got me to the finished piece. I went through a series of ideas, settling on the idea of a ballerina inspired by the thin forms of Alberto Giacometti. But I wasn't in love with the idea and completely changed directions at the last minute. Now, I need to first fix this broken support, and I used coat hanger wire just to hold it in place. Just don't look under there. It wasn't a pretty fix, but it worked. I'm also using coat hanger wire for the leg and arm armatures, then wrapping them in heavy-duty aluminum foil to get a rough texture. Now, I tried using coat hanger wire for the body, but it just wasn't stiff enough and it kept falling over. So instead, I'm using a couple of the various rods I have in my stash of odds and ends, gluing them in place with clear construction adhesive by Loctite. Not sponsored, but it's really good stuff. Now, as far as materials go, you don't need anything fancy. Coat hanger wire, aluminum foil, and even archival paper will stand the test of time if you treat it right. Now, I'm simply wrapping this coat hanger wire around those rods and then twisting them in place just to form the armatures for the arms. And then a little hot glue will hold them in place while I wrap the heavy-duty aluminum foil around them. The head is a lid from an old tea tin, again wrapped in foil and then shaped. To get the skirt shape, I'm using thin wire to tie the end of the supports to where they connect in the center, and then gently pulling to make a curve. And you'll see what this looks like a little later. Now I'm mounting the whole thing to this base made from a watch box, but I'm filling it with a plastic jar of rocks for weight. After marking where I want the umbrella handle to attach, I first drill down through the box top and jar lid, and then screw back up through the jar lid and then the box top and into the umbrella handle. And then hot glue will hold everything in place, and then I can move on to painting. I started with a new technique for painting the skirt, but instead of the random swirls I was expecting, it was just a mauve-y mess. So I went to white spray paint. The only question I think we all have is, where's my respirator? At least I'm in a well-ventilated space, but please don't do what I'm doing here. Wear a respirator. For the bronze, I'm mixing 50-50 gold and burnt umber. Both are acrylic paint, and then using this mop brush to get into all the rough texture. Now that brush was an old makeup brush my wife was done with, so if you have access to them, they actually are really good for a second life as a paintbrush. Alright, this is about where I started to question the direction. I really just didn't like this whole piece. And so after painting the base, I really just couldn't take it anymore. I had to change directions, even this far into the project. The new piece tells more of a story and expresses more of a feeling. It's the security of this little house watched by a massive tree, and I've moved to more of my personal kind of surrealist style. The tree is going to have massive orange and red berries on it, so the orange is a well-mixed blend of an orange and burnt umber. To get the circles, I simply load up the brush, spin it, and then backfill with more paint. The dark red is a well-mixed blend of dark red and more burnt umber. But to get them as dark as I wanted, I ended up having to go over them a second time. Now, after looking at it, I really wasn't thrilled with the white background, so I'm backfilling over that with a heavy coat of a loosely blended equal parts of dark green, more burnt umber, and a dash of black. So 50-50 green and burnt umber, and just a little bit of black for color. This part took almost 3 hours over a couple of days, and you can see why as I show you how slow it takes to just kind of tediously paint between all of those spaces. Off camera, I added more texture to the base to give it more of a tree trunk feel, but it's also a great way to cover up some flaws and adhesive that was on the surface. Now, to add the house, I first cut out the facade and a side to get the measurements right, and then once I was happy with the size and shape, it was time to make the actual house, which I'm making using a box structure. To do this, trace the cutout onto this archival cardstock, and then you'll mark where the folds will be, and then just duplicate it like you see here. You'll clean up the lines, and then rough in the tabs for closing the house form and attaching the roof. We'll also need to add a bottom here, so you'll have a surface to glue it to the base. Now, I should have made this a bit longer because you can always trim down, but it ended up working out fine, even though it was a little short. Then just cut it out. But we'll skip this part. You don't need to see me cut this out, right? When folding, use a straight edge to get a nice, crisp fold. Then use a little paper glue to close up the house form. Once that's dry, the roof is just a house-wide strip of the same cardstock. Using your house as a guide, measure and mark half the roof, fold at the mark, and cut. And then attach with more paper glue. When that's dry, glue the bottom in place and let that whole thing dry. And yes, I'm painting the white cardstock white, both to control the color and to seal it. So just make sure you're getting all those surfaces. I'm painting the door and windows with the smallest brush I have. Now you're seeing this at like triple speed, but I actually am taking time to keep those lines nice and crisp and straight. And I don't know if you can tell here, but pulling towards you will give you a straighter line, which is why I ended up having to go back over the door later to fix some of those kind of wavy areas. But with the house done, it's time to attach it to the base, and I'll show you the finished piece in a few seconds. Hey, thanks for sticking with me on this kind of bumpy ride of changes and a complete change of direction at the last minute. I'm really glad that I did all of that because it really came out as more of a personal story. And I really was inspired by somebody else's work, but I wasn't able to make it my own and be happy with it. And I hope that you see that it's totally fine to completely change directions, even if it means completely blowing everything up and starting over at the last minute. Anyway, if you like this video, please consider subscribing, maybe tell a couple of friends, and if you'd like to leave a comment, I'd love to see what you have to say, and I promise to get back to you right away-ish, a couple of days tops. And but anyway, leave a comment, and I hope to see you in my next video. But without further ado, here's the piece.